They say the night hides more than shadows. It hides the truth.
Welcome to Mr. Haunting Whispers, where real crimes, true horrors, and restless spirits speak through the silence. Listen closely, because sometimes the whispers are real.
The earth remembers everything we try to bury. Every footprint, every scream, every name whispered in fear. Time doesn't wash it away, it just pushes it deeper until the ground itself begins to hum with what we've forgotten. Some places are still breathing. You can feel it under your feet if you stand still long enough. Old towns, faded roads, the air thick with something that almost remembers you back. Tonight, we dig a little too deep into places erased from maps and the names the earth chose to keep. This is Mr. Haunting Whispers TV, and you're listening to episode 7, When the Earth Forgot Their Names. My uncle used to own an apple orchard about 20 miles outside of Clanton, a tiny farming town that barely had a main street. The place was old, 3 generations worth of trees, all lined in neat rows that glowed gold in the fall. After he passed, he left the property to me. No wife, no kids, just the orchard, a rusted pickup, and a farmhouse with a roof that leaked whenever it rained. I didn't plan on staying, but when I drove up to check the place, something about it felt wrong. It wasn't the way the trees looked. They were healthy, thick with fruit. It was the sound. When the wind blew, it didn't sound like wind. It sounded like whispering. I told myself it was just leaves brushing each other, a trick of air and nerves. But that first night, as I lay in bed, I started to hear it again. Not outside, not anymore. It came through the old radio on the nightstand. It wasn't on. I'd unplugged it earlier that evening, but faint static hissed from the speakers anyway. And under the static, voices, dozens of them, whispering in rhythm. I leaned close, and I swear to God I heard them say my name. The next morning, I checked the wiring. The radio wasn't even connected to power. I threw it out. But that night, the whispers came back. Not through the radio this time, through the trees. A low murmur starting near the edge of the orchard and moving closer, like the wind carried a conversation it wasn't meant to. The voices blended together, too soft to separate, too human to ignore. I walked out with a flashlight. The air smelled like rot and rain. When I stopped moving, the whispers stopped too. That's when I heard one voice break away from the others. It was behind me. It said, "Don't let us grow again." The next morning, I called the county inspector, told him there might be some kind of contamination, gas, pesticide residue, something in the soil causing hallucinations. He came out, took samples, asked questions, looked around. Then he asked where I got the land. When I told him it had been in the family since 1919, he frowned, said his records showed the plot had been condemned back in 1946 after a fire. I told him that couldn't be true. My uncle had been harvesting fruit there every year since before I was born. But the inspector didn't argue. He just handed me his card and said quietly, "You might want to check the roots." That night, I dug. Under the biggest tree near the center of the orchard, the one my uncle always called Old Clara. About 3 feet down, my shovel hit something solid. Not stone, wood. A box, long and narrow. The soil around it was black, sticky and cold. When I pried it open, the stench hit first, and then I saw what was inside. Not bones, not tools. Teeth, hundreds of them, small, white, and human, each one carefully planted into the soil like seeds. I stumbled back, fell, dropped my flashlight. When I picked it up again, the light caught something else. The trees around me had changed. The bark was rippling. The apples on the branches had split open, revealing the same tiny white shapes embedded inside. Teeth. And the whispering. The whispering had turned into words. Over and over all around me, the voices hissed, "We are what you planted." I ran, left the farm that night, and didn't stop driving until sunrise. The next day, I called the county again. They sent someone to inspect the property. When I followed up a week later, they told me the orchard had burned down. Electrical issue, they said. No survivors. I almost asked what they meant by survivors, but then I hung up. A few nights ago, I was driving through Clanton again. I didn't plan to stop, but out of habit, I looked to where the orchard used to be. It's gone now, just a field of tall grass. But as I drove past, my radio, the one I replaced years ago, cut out for a few seconds. In the static, I heard one faint, familiar whisper, "Don't let us grow again." I've been into shortwave radio since I was a kid. My dad was in the Navy. Used to say, if you listen long enough, the world talks back. He wasn't wrong. Most nights after work, I'd sit in my shed with the equipment humming, an old Kenwood receiver, patched cables, a halo of soft static wrapping around me like white noise therapy. It's quiet work, comforting. You start to think of the world not as one big place, but as a network of whispers, until something answers. It was last winter, sometime around 1:30 a.m. I was scanning through mid-range frequencies when I caught it, a faint woman's voice buried under the static. At first, I thought it was just a weather station, those automated alerts they broadcast for ships and pilots. But this wasn't a monotone voice, it was human, trembling, and she kept repeating the same thing. "This is KX91, calling from Eldon Ridge. Please, is anyone still out there?" I froze. Eldon Ridge. I knew that name. Or I thought I did. It sounded familiar, like something from a dream you can't shake. I tried responding, using my old call sign. "KX91, this is Delta 7. I read you." For a few seconds, only static. Then the voice came back, clearer this time, breaking through like she'd just tuned me in. "Delta 7, please, we need help. The water's rising. The roads are gone. Please." Then nothing. Just silence. I sat there staring at the dials for a long time. No modern station uses KX anymore. That call prefix was retired decades ago. I checked my logbook, then pulled out my old radio atlas. Eldon Ridge wasn't listed anywhere. Still, the signal had been strong, not distant, like it came from nearby. I triangulated it using my secondary receiver. According to the coordinates, it originated just 40 miles north of me, right in the middle of a state forest, except there's nothing there. No towns, no power lines, no signal towers. I went back on the air the next night, same frequency, same time, and right on cue, 1:30 a.m., the voice came through again. "This is KX91. Water's gone, roads are gone, everyone's gone, but the tower remembers." Then a long pause, and one last transmission, so faint I almost missed it. "If you hear this, don't answer back. It brings the water." Now, I keep the radio unplugged, but every night, right around 1:30, the static starts again, just loud enough for me to hear. And sometimes, when it does, I swear I can smell the rain. The house I grew up in used to sit on the edge of a forest, a narrow stretch of pines and red soil that everyone in town just called the Hollow. My parents bought the place in the 80s for next to nothing. It was old even then, built before the town itself had a name. When I inherited it last year, the realtor told me I could tear it down if I wanted. The foundation was cracked, the wiring was ancient, but something about it felt alive. And that's not a metaphor. Even before I moved in, I could feel the floorboards hum. At first, I thought it was just the pipes or old wiring, but there was rhythm to it. A deep, slow thrum, like something breathing under my feet. It always seemed to pulse once every few seconds, and when I pressed my ear to the floor, I could feel warmth rising through the wood. My wife said I was imagining it, that maybe the house had a boiler or an old septic line buried under it, but I checked. There was nothing. Then the cracks started showing. It began in the hallway near the kitchen, thin, jagged lines that split wider every day. At night, we'd hear creaks, the sound of boards shifting like footsteps in the walls. One evening, my son called me into his room. He said the floor was moving. When I looked, the boards really were rising, ever so slightly, bending upward in a perfect round shape. I pried one loose with a screwdriver. Underneath, I found a root, thick, dark, and pulsing. It wasn't from any tree I'd ever seen. Its surface looked almost like skin, and when I touched it, I could swear I felt a heartbeat. I called a contractor the next morning. He took one look and told me the root had probably grown in from the forest. Said he'd bring in a backhoe to dig it out. But when the crew arrived, the soil under the foundation was too dense, too tightly packed like concrete. They said the root wasn't spreading outwards, it was growing up. That night, the hum was louder. We could feel it through the walls, and the pictures on the shelves trembled slightly, like the heartbeat of the house was syncing with ours. I didn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., I went down to the basement. The air was hot, damp, and smelled like something rotting underwater. The hum was loudest there. I turned on my flashlight and saw that the concrete floor had split open down the center. From the crack, something was emerging. It looked like a bundle of black cords twisting together, pushing through the floor like veins through skin. The surface shimmered wet in the light, and at the tip of one root, I saw something white. At first, I thought it was a rock. Then I realized it was a tooth. Human. I stumbled back, and that's when I heard it. A voice, low and heavy, coming from inside the walls. It said, "You've been here before." I turned off the light. Everything went silent except for my breathing. Then the floor shifted again. I swear to God, I could hear more voices now, muffled, like people buried deep beneath me, whispering through soil and wood. They weren't angry. They sounded tired, like they'd been speaking for a very long time. The next morning, my wife wanted to leave, but when we opened the front door, the porch had split in two. The roots had reached the surface, thick as wrists, curling around the steps like vines. I grabbed the axe from the shed and swung at them. The blade sank in easily, but instead of sap or wood, dark liquid sprayed out, warm and metallic like blood. The house groaned, and from the crack beneath the stairs, I heard something inhale, long, deep, as though it had finally found air again. We left that day. Didn't take anything with us. We just drove until the forest was gone from the rearview mirror. 2 weeks later, I went back with the sheriff and a demolition crew. The house was gone. Every beam, every board, every trace collapsed into a sinkhole where the basement used to be. The sheriff said it looked like the ground had swallowed it whole. When they brought in equipment to check for gas pockets, the geologist found something strange. He said there were old tunnels under the property, not man-made, wider than tree roots, stretching for miles, and inside them were what he called organic remains. He didn't elaborate. That night, back at the motel, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing that hum again, the deep pulse under the floor. When I looked down, the carpet seemed to shift, and in the faint light from the window, I saw something pushing upward beneath the fabric, a slow, rising bulge. I lifted the edge, and there, pressing against the underside of the floor, was something black, alive, pulsing. It whispered, "We remember the ones who built the walls." I moved out of state after that, sold everything, but sometimes when the house I live in now settles at night, I hear the same slow hum beneath my bed, and I wonder, maybe we never really own the ground we build on. Some say the earth forgets us. once we're gone, time smooths over every scar, every story, until even our names sound like echoes in the wind. But I don't think that's true. The ground remembers. It remembers the weight of our footsteps. It remembers what we tried to bury. And sometimes it remembers the ones we were never supposed to find again. Every whisper, every breath that was ever taken here, it all lingers just below the surface, waiting for someone curious enough to listen. Maybe that's what horror really is. Not ghosts, not monsters, but the truth that the world never forgets. And when the earth whispers back, you realize it's not the dead we should fear. It's the memories that refuse to die. This has been Mr. Haunting Whispers TV. Thank you for listening. Sleep softly tonight, and if the ground moves beneath you, don't listen too long. It might just remember your name.
You've been listening to Mr. Haunting Whispers, where every truth leaves a scar. If the story unsettled you, good. That means you were listening. Subscribe and stay close to the dark, because the next whisper might be for you.